Yo, what's going on YouTube? It's your man Soul here. Welcome back to the channel. You know what it is when you clicked it. Today we're doing just a quick Soul discussion. I guess probably not a quick one. I'm not really sure how long this video is going to be. But I do want to talk about some things that we have recently gotten. Some upcoming things for Wrath Classic. You know, just giving my overall take on some stuff. I haven't really been talking a lot about up-to-date news. So this is kind of like the once-over for everything. But if you are new to the channel and at the end of the video, if you like what you see, pardon me, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot as we make it down the long road to 1K. And without further ado, let's jump on in. All right, so as you can see, I'm just kind of cooling right now, just leveling a warrior, taking advantage of the joyous journeys buff we got. Don't really know if this warrior will really, see the fruits of its labor of me leveling it, but who knows? We're just kind of waiting for the pre-patch right now. And speaking of the pre-patch, for the uninitiated, we got the release date for the pre-patch, which is August 30th. That came out the other day, and along with that, we kind of got a list of events that is going to transpire, after the pre-patch, leading up to the release date of Wrath Classic, and also up until the release of the Phase 1 raids. So we got a lot of information to discuss and go over, and I'm happy to do that. So let's get started. First things first, I do want to say I do like the road ahead. I like the fact that Blizzard, gave us time. They gave us 2 weeks before the pre-patch. They outlined a lot of the shit that happens after the pre-patch. They don't really do that too often. Like, they tend to play things close to the vest and kind of tell you information when you kind of already deduced when something's coming, right? When the community has kind of figured it out. So I'm happy for this. I'm happy that they're giving people time to plan, time to adjust, do whatever you got to do for your guild, whatever you got to do for IRL stuff. I'm happy for that. So that was a much I'm gonna give much praise to Blizzard for that. And speaking about the road ahead, so a couple of these dates are pretty, kind of already knew some of them, right? We knew the arena season was coming to an end soon, so we know that's happening the 29th. Of course we knew the release date for Wrath, because that got leaked, and then it got officially announced 2 days later, so we kind of already knew that. But certain things we didn't know, certain things that caused a little bit of controversy. So as an example, Brewfest. So Brewfest was a point of contention because, according to the road ahead, Brewfest is scheduled to release the week of September 20th. So September 20th through October 6th, right? The issue with that was, if it launches on September 20th, obviously that's before the September 26th Wrath Classic launch date. So that means you lose about 6 days of, not being able to level to 80 in order to get that gear, right? Because you need to be level 80 to use that Brewfest stuff. So that kind of puts a hamper on things. Well, Blizzard then also came out and announced that this year's Brewfest would not be the level 80 version. It would stay the level 70 version, the TBC version. So it doesn't give any added pressure for a person to level as quickly as they can to 80 and try to fit in as many lockouts of doing Corbin Dire Brew as they possibly can, which in my opinion I get. Sometimes you got to protect people from themselves, and there definitely would have been people who felt pressure, maybe just from themselves in their own head, or maybe even from their guild, to, hey, do that shit, get 80 the first day or the second day and get as many Dire Brew shit as you can. I'm sure that pressure was out there, so I'm not going to say it was a needless change. For me, it probably wouldn't have done anything personally. I still would have leveled to the same pace. I probably would have got maybe 1 or 2 lockouts in. I'm not a day oneer where I have to hit 80 the first day. I was never gonna do that. No. Unfortunately, this title has some negative connotations to it, but I'm a dad gamer. I got kids. I got responsibilities, and those responsibilities don't change because of WoW. So yeah, that's what it is. I think sometimes Blizzard can be overprotective when they're trying to protect the players from themselves, but in this case I think it was pretty warranted. You don't want people to feel pressure. Another thing I want to talk about is the Naxx Rammus release date. So, well, I guess not just Naxx, all of the raids really. So Naxx, Eye of Eternity, and Obsidian Sanctum all coming out on October 6th, and I believe that is a Thursday. October 6th is a Thursday release. I'm not surprised that we got a couple releases on Thursday, so this doesn't really surprise me. If anything, this is now much consistent with TBC shit. So I'm not really mad at that. It does put a hamper on my guild personally, but if you're a weekend like raiding guild, this doesn't really do anything to you because you were gonna raid on the weekend anyway. So I see people upset about it, but it's like, at this point, bro or sis, like, you kind of already knew this was the thing. Like, this has been the thing for TBC for a minute now, so that's kind of how I feel on it. I knew for a fact they weren't releasing all of these raids the week of September 26th. No chance in hell. If the X-Pack was coming out on a Monday, ain't no way Tuesday everything's opening up. No way. That puts that pressure that we were talking about before. That puts that pressure out on people to feel like they have to level egregiously, you know what I mean? So, and we're gonna die here in this pool. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but shit is going left fast and we're gonna die. But anyway, yeah, there was no way they were releasing all that shit. So that being said, I'm glad to see that it's not that week, because that would have put pressure on me and my schedule and the time, or it would have affected the time allotted for me to play personally. So I guess that's kind of a selfish take, but it gives me time to level at at my own pace. I'm not a slow leveler, but I wasn't gonna one session it. It gives me time to level at my own pace, get a couple lockouts in, not feel rushed to get pre-raid best, and do my thing. Now, I think some people would disagree with me and say, are you out of your mind? From September 26th to October 6th is only 10 days. That's nowhere near enough time. And I mean, that's going to vary between person to person. Like, everyone's leveling speed is different. Some people think that August 30th is too soon for the pre-patch. And for anyone out there who sees this video and thinks that, I implore you to put in the comments why you think that, and when would you have released that pre-patch, right? That's what I would ask, because Blizzard's goal was to give us the pre-patch with enough time to play longer than what we got from TBC, right? TBC's pre-patch lasted 2 weeks, then TBC came out, so that was 2 weeks to level a Draenei from 1 to 70, or Blood Elf from 1 to 70. Get your Shaman, your Alliance Shaman, or your I ran into the wrong dungeon. Get your Alliance Shaman or your Horde Paladin ready for raiding and move on with life, right? So 2 weeks to do all that. Now we got 4 weeks, which isn't that much more time, in my opinion. Like, once you factor in, people working, people taking care of IRL stuff, and then playing, like, 4 weeks isn't that much time, in my opinion, but it's still, better than 2 weeks. So I'll give them that. But yeah, if you're one of those people who think that August 30th is too soon and you want to see a later pre-patch, when would you have given us the pre-patch? If you think that, put that in the comments below. But anyway, moving on. Yeah, I knew for a fact we weren't getting raids opening first week. That's a fact. But again, overall, I am happy with this little rope ahead, little itinerary we got. This is really good. So I think that's it for really, like, the breakdown of that. And I guess we can shift focus to, like, talking about, beta and stuff like that, and what we've seen on the beta. We've seen, like, mad bug fixes. So Blizzard been working. They ain't lazy. They ain't resting on their laurels. They've been working, because that was a concern too, that Blizzard would be not Blizzard, but Wrath wouldn't be ready. It wouldn't be ready for release. And it was a legitimate concern, because there was some pretty egregious bugs out there. Like the Warlock one, the Glyph of Quick Decay not working, was a huge one. Slam not recognizing how much rage you got for warriors was a huge one. I'm not sure, I'd have to double check, but I know Death Knights were experiencing the Glyph, the Icy Touch sigil, not the Glyph, the Icy Touch sigil, that was like double dipping from Icy Talons, making their damage phenomenal, especially for like dual wield unholy, like running a Necrosis or Blood Cake weapon and having like double the attack speed you would normally get from Icy Talons. Like, that's insane. So I mean, and people knew, like, the community knew that was a bug clearly, but things like that can't launch live, right? And even if it did, not saying that they couldn't fix it, but it just doesn't feel right when you launch a game with bugs. Like, it never feels right. So I'm glad they're getting that stuff fixed. And we've seen a lot of these bug fixes come up, not just those are the ones that were like more prominent, but we've seen other ones too. So I'm glad they're still working on it. They're still doing things that show us that they're progressing, and they're really trying hard to make sure the game works as smooth as it can for when it releases. Going a little bit deeper into the beta, like, now that we've gotten some information on like Warcraft logs, and we can see like the kind of damage output the raids have been, taking. Like we can see the damage output that raids are doing, the damage taken that tanks are doing, the healing, like we can see all that stuff. We can kind of gauge the difficulty to this quote unquote buffed Naxx. And I want to say that ultimately, from what I've seen, from what I've been told, from what I've, the answers I've gotten, Naxx is still going to be that raid that you just use to gear up. And I think that's okay. I don't know what preconceived notions people had about Naxx. I know I certainly had some, like, in my head, I had to tell myself that Naxx doesn't have to be as hard as the hard modes in Old War. It doesn't have to be, as hard as TOGC. It's meant for you to gear up to get to those points. Like, it's not meant to grief you. But I'm a person who, like, when I buy console games, I automatically play on the hardest difficulty or the second hardest difficulty if I think the game might prove to be a little bit challenging. Like, I like challenge because I think when you overcome challenge, when you overcome adversity, it makes the reward feel better. Like, if you play GTA with unlimited ammo, unlimited armor, and $10 billion, and you complete a mission, it don't really feel great. But when you do that with, baseline, with just what you've gotten naturally, it feels better. So I like to overcome adversity through skill, not necessarily through just, it being handed to me. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying Naxx has to be that way. Again, I had to police and tell myself that that's not the way, and that's okay. But I think Naxx is going to prove a challenge. Like, if you look at some of those patchwork logs, like, patchwork is slapping tanks. I think I mentioned that before in one of my other videos. Like, he's not giving, like, he's definitely having his way with some of these tanks. So he's not the same patchwork that we've seen, in the original vanilla, where he's a pushover. I think the same thing can be said for, like, Gluth. Gluth was, even though Gluth was bugged, Gluth was fixing tanks, fixing the raid, because his decimate was just fucking people up and people weren't able to get healed up quick enough. So yeah, like, things are gonna happen. So, but again, Naxx doesn't have to be that hard. I had to tell myself that. And if you're hoping to walk in and think that Naxx is going to be the same as Heroic ICC, I'm sorry, that's not the case, and it doesn't need to be the case. So yeah, that's it for Naxx. Maybe in another video I'll, like, go through it boss by boss, and we can, like, analyze what's going on with each boss and figure out, like, what's the difficult fights, what's the non-difficult fights. And yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that, even not just for Naxx, like for all of the phase 1 raids. I think I'll do that. But yeah, as far as Naxx, because Naxx is, like, kind of like the magnum opus for phase 1, it's as hard as it needs to be. I think that's a proper way to describe Naxx. As a person who has not been on the beta, who has just been word of mouth and viewing videos and logs, I think it is as difficult as it needs to be. As far as Eye of Eternity and Obsidian Sanctum go, I mean, I think OS 3 Drakes is still going to be probably the hardest fight in phase 1. Eye of Eternity, I don't think is going to give people problems, but I mean, who knows? Like, each guild is different. They might sneak buff it, before or after they released it. So who knows? Like, you know what I mean? But I think OS 3D is still going to give people some issues, and then you'll learn it, and then you'll be like, all right, this is easy, and life goes on. So the next thing I want to talk about is, I guess, the class representation, and I guess the performance based off of class representation, because I feel like there's a lot of sleeper picks on or there will be a lot of sleeper picks in Wrath. And I say that because I feel like if you look at, like, old tier lists for Wrath Classic and you kind of look at some of the newer ones that have come out, it's a little bit of a difference. Like, people used to just really, like, shit on shamans, but I feel like people are going to give them a little bit more of a chance, especially enhanced. Like, Elemental still might have that, like, negative stigma on them, and I really don't know why. I understand that Elemental starts off really strong and their scaling is just the issue. Like, they don't scale as well as other classes, but I feel like you can overcome that maybe with just good enough skill and a good enough community and player base behind it. I could be wrong there. That could just me being naive and knowing little about the shaman community, but I feel like it's not as bad. I feel like nothing is as bad as what it seems on the internet. Like, that's just how I generally look at things, right? Like, I've been hearing, for months, Prot Warrior's the worst, the worst tank for Wrath Classic, right? And in some ways it's weaker than the other tanks, but in other ways it's stronger than the tanks. Like, on my Blood DK versus Prot Paladin video, Prot Paladin has the best control, the best mob control, that is, of any tank. Even some bosses, like, they can do things to mobs groups of mobs, single target mobs, whatever have you, that other tanks just can't do. Their damage is incredible. Their snap threat is incredible. So they are probably the best speedrunner tank. Like if you're a guild and you're doing speedruns and that's your thing, you're probably gonna have a prot warrior. So I don't understand the big hate around it. And to this day, I still get hate and guile on my prot warrior talent video, because people for some reason think that I'm shitting on the prot warrior, and I'm really not. Like, I know I put that thing in the beginning of the video, but I wasn't trying to shit on warrior. I was simply saying that I don't think it's as bad as what it seems, and I think that's starting to seep through now. Like, I think people are understanding that not just prot warrior but the warrior as a whole, it was more memed about than the information that came out being factual. Like, Fury is still pretty weak in phase 1, but it probably won't be nearly as bad as what people are saying on the internet. Same thing with arms. Arms is pretty fine in phase 1. And if you're a prot warrior, you really want to be a prot warrior, if you just want to be a warrior in general, you'll be fine. Like, you will be fine. You'll be fine. Don't be discouraged. You know what I mean? So that's just how I feel. But yeah, going back to the DPS side of things, I think there are sleeper picks when it comes to damage profiles and stuff like that. Not saying that your Death Knight DPS specs, your assassination rogues, your warlocks, all those guys are going to be strong. Not saying that, but I don't think like your enhanced shamans, your boomkins, your Ellie shamans, I don't think they're going to be as weak as what people are making them out to be. That's really the general gist of what I'm trying to say. And I think some of the logs prove that, right? Like, it's not just warlocks, rogues, and mages at the top, right? We've seen some damage, some other damage specs doing well. So I think I think once we get our hands really into Wrath and we can see, and everyone can see firsthand what certain specs and classes can do, I think that's when we'll be able to get a fair estimation. But as of right now, I think going into it, I still have my reservations about BM hunters, frost mages, and subtlety rogues for PvE, but I think everything else is pretty fair game. Like, you gotta remember, Wrath was the expansion where Blizzard really tried to double down on the bring the player, not the class thing. That's why you see a lot of classes either bring the same buffs or a version of the same buffs across the board, or something unique in it of themselves, like shamans only bringing spell haste, right? Like, you see things like that. So I think Blizzard overall did a good job with that. Some people say, oh, it homogenized the classes, and to some degree it did, but homogenization also means inclusion for a lot of things. So you don't always have to look at it as a bad thing. So I think overall with classes, most of the classes are going to be fine, if not all of them. Like I said, I still have my reservations about BM hunters, subtlety rogues, and frost mages for PvE. But if you're good at one of those 3 specs and your rating, don't let me stop you. Like, you can be a great frost mage and do fine in any kind of challenging PvE content. Like, don't take what I say for granted. So that's really the gist of that. So the last thing I want to touch base on is kind of something that people have been asking about, and originally I was going to put this in part of another video and save this section for like personal stuff that I would talk about, but there's too much other things going on in the classic space for me to be talking about personal shit. Like, I'll save that for another video. So I'll take some time to talk about like preparation for Wrath Classic and what I've done, and maybe what you can do. Like, even though it's not too late. I don't want to say that it's not too late, but if you are starting to do something, you better move with some urgency. So the first thing I would say is make sure you got some gold. I know that seems like well, duh, so everybody needs gold, but no, make sure you have a nice little nugget of gold available, especially if you are starting a new tune like me, like I'm starting a Death Knight, or if you're leveling something with the buff and you're planning to switch mains. Like, make sure you have gold, because you're going to need it for professions, you're going to need it for dual spec, you're going to need it for cold weather flying. So make sure you have gold. Make sure there are ways to get gold, so you can do dailies, like the Isle of Keldanis dailies. They give you like 350 gold each day, easy, without question, right? If you're doing dungeons, or you're doing like the early phase raids like Kara, or SSC or Gruel and Mag. All of those give badges, right? And if you necessarily don't need to use the badges for gear, which you're probably going to do, liquidate them. Use all the badges to buy gems. Put them on the auction house. I guarantee you someone's going to buy them. Like, people are going to want to gem up their leveling gear. They want to level fast. People are going to do it, especially if you're on a mid to high pop server. People are going to buy the badges, buy the gems. So do that. Liquidate your badges if you don't need them for gear. That leads me to my next thing. If you do need the badges for gear, stock up on some badges. Karazhan is an easy like 20 plus badges. SSC and TK take nothing. Those are pretty easy badges. So stock up on some badges. Make sure you buy some important pieces. If you're a melee DPS, make sure you get a weapon. Make sure you get chest piece, big stat budget items, legs, helms, like all that stuff. Make sure you get those big items so this way you can level a little bit quicker. And I guess the last point I'll say about preparation for Classic is really just have a path set out. Have a path set out for your new main when you hit 70. Have a path set out for when you're leveling to 80. Now, it doesn't have to be a definitive, this is what I'm going to stick to 110%, but just have, a modicum of an idea of what you're going to do. So like if Wrath Classic launches, you should already know where you're going, either Borean Tundra or Howling Forge, right? If you're planning on leveling with the dungeon group, you should know which dungeons you're going to hit, right? If you're planning on leveling by yourself, you should know which zones you're going to hit. So just have a semblance of an idea of a path set out, because going in aimlessly is just going to slow you down even more. But yeah, that's really it for like the prep. Like what I've done, like I already have a surplus of gold. Fortunately for me, I wasn't raiding as heavily in the early phases as I was in the latter phases. So I was able to just stock up on gold, and now I'm sitting on a giant surplus to where I can just allocate a large amount to my Death Knight and say, okay, I can buy epic riding, I can buy dual spec, I can buy, just straight up go to the auction house and buy stuff for my profession. I can do all of those things so I can more focus on getting gear for when I'm leveling in Wrath Classic. So I would say if you have an idea of your gold resource, what you're going to do with your badges, if you even need badges, and a path for leveling, you're in a pretty good starting spot. And that's really it for the video, guys. Sorry this took so long. I've been kind of not trying to burn myself out with video adjustment. I've been just kind of cooling, but I've also been collecting information, video clips, and data for other projects that I'm working on. So this was long overdue. Normally I don't take that long to put out videos like this. So this one was well overdue, and I apologize, but I'm here, we're moving strong, and it couldn't be done without you, the viewer. So again, if you like what you saw at this point and you want to see more, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the video out a lot. But other than that, you guys know the deal. You've been great. I've been Soul, and I'm out. Peace.